Have you ever dreamed of standing somewhere so breathtaking that words simply disappear? Imagine watching the sunrise over ancient mountains, wandering through timeless cities, or discovering hidden places that seem too beautiful to exist. The truth is, life moves quickly, and those dream destinations often stay trapped on a maybe someday list. But today, that journey begins. In this episode, we'll explore some of the world's most unforgettable places to visit before you die, while helping you improve your English naturally through rich vocabulary, real-life expressions, and immersive storytelling. So, relax, open your imagination, and let's travel the world together. One incredible destination and one English lesson at a time.
Yeah, that really is the core mission of our deep dive today. We're basically pulling together decades of geological research, historical accounts, ecological studies, and, firsthand travel logs to take you on this massive journey across the globe.
Right, like a full audio tour.
Exactly. We're going to stop at 10 locations that, they fundamentally alter the way you see the world, but we aren't just going to tell you what these places look like.
No, because that would just be reading a brochure.
Right, totally. We're going to break down the science, the history, and the engineering that make them possible. And along the way, we'll naturally introduce rich English vocabulary and idioms that you can use to describe, the human experience. It's really about giving you the linguistic tools to articulate moments of pure awe.
I love that. And, before we get into the actual mechanics of these incredible places, I kind of want to address the framing we just used. That phrase, places to visit before you die.
Ah, yeah. That one.
Right, because you see this phrase everywhere. It's printed on glossy magazine covers. It's like the title of 1,000 travel blogs.
Right.
But let's be totally candid here. It can feel incredibly heavy.
Oh, for sure.
Some might even call it morbid. And when we use the word morbid, we're talking about an unhealthy interest in death or a fascination with unsettling subjects. And hearing the phrase before you die often triggers that morbid feeling, like someone just started a giant countdown clock right next to your ear.
It absolutely does. The word morbid carries a ton of cultural weight. But I think if we strip away the initial discomfort, that phrase isn't really meant to be gloomy at all.
No.
Not at all. It's actually just a dose of profound honesty. I like to think of it as a gentle, necessary nudge, reminding us that our time to experience the physical world is, it's finite.
Right. We don't have forever.
Exactly. There are certain landscapes, certain ecological phenomena that are just too magnificent to relegate to a someday that, statistically speaking, might never arrive.
I really appreciate that reframe. It kind of turns a threat into an invitation. And, it reminds me of a specific story from our research that perfectly encapsulates why we're doing this deep dive.
Of the Scottish Highlands story.
Yes. So we found this account of a retired teacher named Margaret. She was in her 70s, sitting on a train winding through the Scottish Highlands.
Yeah.
And she was traveling completely alone. The observer noted that she was just glowing with this quiet, overwhelming happiness. And when someone finally asked her what brought her all the way out there, she laughed and said something deeply profound. She said, "I spent 40 years promising myself I'd see this view. I finally stopped promising and started packing."
That is it's such a powerful statement. And you use the word profound there, which is perfectly placed.
Thank you.
Because when something is profound, it means it contains a very deep, meaningful truth, right? It shows great insight that cuts through the noise of everyday life. Margaret's words were, simple on the surface, but they really hit at the very core of human psychology.
They really hit home because, let's be honest, virtually all of us do what she did for those 4 decades. We engage in this collective habit of delaying our joy.
We really do.
And we have a great phrasal verb for this in English, to put off. We put off the things we want most. We postpone them.
Right. We convince ourselves we need to wait for a larger savings account or, wait until the kids are older.
Exactly. Or we wait for that mythical, perfect moment that never actually comes. But while we're busy putting things off, the beautiful places of the world just go on without us.
Wow, yeah, go on without us.
It's a really evocative idiom, right? To go on without us. It means the universe is running its spectacular daily show entirely indifferent to whether we're in the audience.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
The rivers keep carving, the auroras keep firing, the mountains keep catching the morning light. The world's beauty is relentless, and it does not pause.
It really doesn't. The Earth doesn't consult our calendars. The geological and biological processes, they just happen on their own ancient timetables.
It makes me think of an analogy. Keeping a mental list of places you'll see someday is like a lot like buying one of those expensive handcrafted leather journals.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
Right. You buy with the absolute best intentions of filling it with your thoughts, but then you stare at that pristine, thick paper, and you become terrified of ruining the first page with your methy handwriting. So you just close it, and it sits on a shelf for a decade. Perfectly safe, flawlessly clean, and completely empty.
That is a highly resonant way to look at it. Because, I mean, the empty journal is safe from mistakes, but by keeping it empty, you've defeated the entire purpose of its existence.
Exactly. So consider this deep dive the moment we finally uncap the pen and make a mark on that first page. We're going to start this journey by looking upward into environments where humanity has absolutely zero control.
Yes. We're starting with two phenomena that are entirely dictated by natural light, occurring in incredibly fragile ecosystems. One takes place in the brutal, freezing expanse of the Arctic, and the other in the warm, equatorial waters of the Indian Ocean.
Two totally different extremes.
Completely. But both of these destinations require a traveler to completely surrender their modern desire for instant gratification.
Let's begin in the freezing cold. I want you to put yourself in this scene. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, somewhere deep in the wilderness of northern Norway or, Finnish Lapland.
Just bitterly cold.
The cold is so aggressive that the moisture in your breath is literally freezing onto your eyelashes. You're bundled in layers, shifting your boots in the deep snow, holding a metal thermos of coffee, and just staring at a pitch black sky.
Probably questioning all your life choices at that moment.
Oh, totally. You're starting to wonder if you've wasted thousands of dollars and your entire night. And then, without a single sound, the sky tears open. Ribbons of neon green light begin to ripple across the atmosphere, twisting and spiraling like some massive luminous serpent.
It's just magic.
And then the edges bleed into violet, and maybe a soft, dusty pink. You are standing under the aurora borealis, the northern lights.
The visual is staggering, honestly. But the underlying mechanics are even more astonishing. To understand what's actually happening up there, we need the vocabulary word collide.
Collide, which means to crash together.
Right, to crash together with immense violent force, because the aurora is the result of a massive cosmic collision, and it actually starts 93 million miles away at the sun.
Wait, really? It starts at the sun.
Yeah. The sun regularly ejects these huge clouds of electrically charged particles, electrons and protons, out into space. This is called the solar wind.
Okay.
And when this solar wind reaches Earth, it slams into our planet's magnetic field, the magnetosphere.
Which is incredibly fortunate for us, right? Because I imagine if that solar wind hit the surface, we'd be completely fried.
Spot on. We would not survive. The magnetic field acts like an invisible shield. But the shield isn't a perfect sphere, right? The magnetic field lines actually curve and dip down at the north and south poles.
Oh, I see.
So like sand funneling into an hourglass, those highly charged solar particles get channeled directly down toward the magnetic poles. And when they hit our upper atmosphere, they violently collide with the gases that make up our air.
So the light we're seeing in the sky is actually the energy from those collisions being released.
Yes, exactly. Think of it like a neon sign. In a neon tube, electricity excites the gas inside, causing it to glow. Well, the aurora is essentially a planetary scale neon sign. And the colors depend entirely on which gas the solar particles collide with and at what altitude. So if they hit oxygen about 60 miles up, you get that iconic, vibrant yellow-green.
Which is the one you usually see in all the photos.
Right. But if they hit oxygen much higher up, around 200 miles, you get a rare, deep red. And if they collide with nitrogen, the sky paints itself in blues and purples.
Knowing that you're looking at solar radiation crashing into Earth's shield at thousands of miles an hour, it just amplifies the awe. When you're standing beneath it, you are struck by a very specific emotion.
Oh, absolutely.
And we have a great English idiom for this, in the best possible way. We use this phrase when an experience that normally has negative connotations actually produces a wonderful feeling.
Right, like feeling small.
Exactly. Standing under the aurora makes you feel utterly tiny. Right. It makes you feel insignificant. Now, feeling small is usually a negative thing. Nobody wants to feel unimportant. Right?
Yeah, nobody.
But out there in the snow, you feel small in the best possible way. It's a profound relief to realize how massive and ancient the universe is compared to our daily anxieties.
It really creates a psychological reset. The default mode network in your brain, that's the part responsible for ego and rumination, It literally quiets down when confronted with that kind of scale.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah. But if you want to experience this, you have to aim for locations situated within the auroral oval. So places like Tromsø in Norway, the dark interior of Iceland, or the vast frozen plains of northern Canada. And you need the long, pitch-black nights of winter, typically between September and March.
But nature refuses to be scheduled, which brings us to an essential vocabulary word. Unpredictable. If something is unpredictable, you cannot foresee or control its behavior. And the Northern Lights are notoriously, frustratingly unpredictable.
They really are. You can optimize every variable. You can track the coronal mass ejections on space weather apps. You can book a remote cabin miles away from city light pollution, travel during a new moon.
And still see nothing.
Exactly. You could still find yourself staring at an impenetrable blanket of gray clouds for weeks straight.
But the uncertainty is the required price of admission. I actually have a friend who planned a trip to Iceland solely for the aurora.
Oh, how did that go?
Well, she stood outside for 3 freezing, heavily overcast nights. She saw absolutely nothing.
Oh, no. That's heartbreaking.
All right. By the 4th night, her final night, she just surrendered. She put on her flannel pajamas, packed her suitcase, and sat on the edge of her bed feeling totally defeated.
Oh.
And in that exact moment, the sky cleared and just exploded with light.
No way.
Yes. She was so overwhelmed, she sprinted outside barefoot into the snow in her pajamas, simultaneously laughing and crying. That is the magic of the unpredictable. When the aurora finally reveals itself, it doesn't feel like a transaction. It doesn't feel like a tourist attraction you purchased. It feels like a rare cosmic gift you had to earn through endurance.
That is an amazing story. And, from the freezing endurance of the Arctic, let's dramatically shift the climate and geography.
Yes, please. Warm us up.
Let's travel to the equator, down into the warm tropical expanse of the Indian Ocean, to a place that feels completely surreal. The Maldives.
Yeah, the Maldives.
We're looking at a nation comprised of more than 1,000 coral islands, grouped into ring-like formations called atolls. And the ocean here is a staggering canvas of 100 distinct blues.
It's hard to even describe how blue it is.
It really is. You've got this pale, translucent turquoise at the shallow shoreline, dropping off into a deep, heavy sapphire where the coral walls descend.
But as beautiful as it is during the day, the true phenomenon happens after dark. Because if you walk along certain beaches in the Maldives at night, the water itself starts to glow.
It's like something out of a fantasy movie.
It really is. Every time a wave crests and crashes onto the sand, it sparkles with thousands of tiny neon blue lights. It looks as though someone scooped up the Milky Way and poured it directly into the surf. And we use an incredible scientific vocabulary word for this: bioluminescence.
Bioluminescence.
Right. Bio refers to life, and luminescence refers to emitting light. So it is light organically produced by a living creature.
The mechanics of bioluminescence are fascinating, honestly. What you're witnessing are millions of microscopic marine organisms, specifically a type of plankton called dinoflagellates.
The dinoflagellates. Try saying that 3 times fast.
Right. But inside their single-cell bodies, this crazy chemical reaction takes place. A molecule called luciferin reacts with oxygen, and it's catalyzed by an enzyme called luciferase, producing a brief, intense flash of cold light.
Okay, hold on. Let me jump in here. We know that these plankton flashlight when the water is agitated, like when a wave breaks or when a swimmer moves their arms through the water, giving a trail of glowing starlight.
Right.
But why? What evolutionary purpose does a microscopic organism have to light up in the dark?
That's the best part. It's essentially a microscopic burglar alarm.
A burglar alarm?
Yeah. When the water around the plankton is disturbed by a small predator trying to eat them, the plankton flash their lights. And that sudden burst of neon blue illuminates the small predator in the pitch-black water, making that small predator suddenly highly visible to much larger predators.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The plankton are basically shining a spotlight on their attackers, hoping a bigger fish will come along and eat the threat.
That is wild. So this incredibly romantic, magical liquid starlight that honeymooners are wading through is actually a massive microscopic panic response. Like a glowing scream for help.
Well, from a biological standpoint, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I have to ask you, though. We just broke down the cold, hard chemistry, right?
Yeah.
Luciferin, enzymes, burglar alarms. Does knowing the raw, unsentimental biology of it strip away the romance? Does the science ruin the magic?
I would argue the complete opposite, actually. Yeah. I think understanding the mechanism makes the visual infinitely more awe-inspiring. Because when you stand on that beach and you understand the biology, you realize you aren't just looking at a pretty color. You're witnessing millions of tiny living creatures communicating, reacting, and surviving in real time.
That's a profound way to look at it.
The ocean stops being a static background and becomes this highly complex, living, breathing entity. The science doesn't erase the magic. The science validates it.
I love that. The science validates the magic. The complexity makes it even more precious, which, unfortunately, leads us to some heavy vocabulary regarding the Maldives. Vulnerable and bittersweet.
Yeah, these are important words.
To be vulnerable means to be exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed, either physically or emotionally. And bittersweet describes a complex emotion that brings both happiness and sadness simultaneously.
And those words fit the Maldives perfectly. It's the lowest lying country on Earth. Its highest natural elevation is scarcely 2 meters above sea level.
2 meters? That's nothing.
It's nothing, which makes the entire archipelago uniquely vulnerable to the rising sea levels driven by global climate change.
And that reality is what makes standing on that glowing beach bittersweet. You are overwhelmed with joy at the beauty, but in the back of your mind, there is a quiet, persistent ache.
Because you know it might not last.
Exactly. You are acutely aware that this fragile paradise is sitting on borrowed time, and parts of it could be completely submerged and uninhabitable within a few decades.
Yeah.
It creates a deep emotional urgency to experience it and protect it while we still can.
It is a profound lesson in impermanence. Now, as we leave the raw, natural phenomena of the auroras and the glowing seas, we're going to explore a different kind of wonder. We're transitioning to environments shaped by staggering human ingenuity.
The builders.
Right. Places where humans didn't just survive in extreme conditions, but built absolute masterpieces. So let's travel from the ocean floor, high into the clouds, and then deep into the desert.
Okay, let's do it. We're heading up to the Andes Mountains in Peru to an elevation of 2,400 meters to look at Machu Picchu, the fabled city in the clouds. And to accurately describe how this city sits on the landscape, we need the vocabulary word perch.
Perch.
To perch means to rest or sit on a high, narrow, and often precarious edge. You might picture a hawk perching on a thin branch. Well, Machu Picchu is literally perched on a narrow green saddle of rock situated between two towering mountain peaks with a sheer drop down to the Urubamba River below.
The story of Machu Picchu is often framed as like an adventure novel. It was an estate built by the great Inca civilization in the 15th century, but after the Spanish conquest, it was abandoned.
Then the jungle just took it over.
Rapidly, the jungle rapidly reclaimed it, and the stone terraces were swallowed by dense vegetation and mist for centuries. Then, in 1911, a Yale historian named Hiram Bingham arrived and brought it to the attention of the wider world.
Okay, I have to push back on the traditional Bingham narrative, though, because the textbooks often say he discovered Machu Picchu, but that's a very Eurocentric myth, isn't it?
Oh, entirely.
The local indigenous people never lost it. When Bingham got there were local Quechua farmers, a man named Melchor Arteaga, specifically who knew exactly where it was. Artea actually guided Bingham up the mountain for the equivalent of a few cents. So we really need to be careful with the word discover when local populations have been living among the ruins all along.
That is a vital correction. Bingham publicized it to the West, but he certainly didn't discover it. The real marvel of Machu Picchu isn't its discovery, but its engineering.
The engineering is mind-blowing.
It's staggering. The sheer technical skill required to build a stone city in that specific location. I mean, the Andes experience incredibly heavy rainfall. If you built a normal city on a steep, rainy ridge, landslides would wash it off the mountain within a decade.
So how is it still sitting there perfectly intact 500 years later?
Because of what you can't see. Roughly 60% of the construction of Machu Picchu is underground.
Wait, 60%?
Yes. The Incas essentially terraformed the mountain. They built deep foundations filled with layers of crushed rock and gravel to act as a highly sophisticated drainage system. When the torrential rains hit, the water doesn't pool and cause mudslides. It filters harmlessly down through the terraced layers. They engineered the mountain to absorb the water.
That is incredibly humbling. And a humbling experience is one that forces you to realize you aren't as advanced or as powerful as you thought. You feel a deep sense of modesty.
Right.
We look back at ancient civilizations and assume modern humans are vastly smarter just because we have smartphones and bulldozers. But looking at that drainage system is deeply humbling.
It forces us to respect the genius of the past.
Yeah.
And the stonework itself introduces a fantastic idiom, To scratch your head.
To scratch your head.
Yeah, if you scratch your head over something, you are deeply puzzled, perplexed, and struggling to understand it. Structural engineers and historians still scratch their heads trying to figure out the logistics of Inca masonry.
Because they didn't use wheels, and they didn't have iron or steel tools. They were working with bronze and stone. Yet they moved massive granite boulders, some the size of small cars, up the side of a sheer mountain.
It's unbelievable.
And they didn't even use mortar. They used a technique called ashlar masonry, where they shaped the stones so perfectly that they locked together like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. You cannot even slide a piece of paper between the stones today.
Which is key for the earthquakes.
Yes. Because they aren't glued together with mortar, when the region's frequent earthquakes hit, the stones reportedly dance. They bounce slightly during the tremors and then settle right back into their perfect interlocking places.
That architectural flexibility is exactly why it survives. And I recall you mentioning an encounter you had there that perfectly summarizes this feeling.
Yes. Oh, this was amazing. I was walking through the main plaza and I noticed this guy. He was a young structural engineer from Germany. He was standing completely motionless, staring intensely at a single stone wall. Just staring. He wasn't taking photos, he was just analyzing the joints. After about 10 solid minutes, he finally turned around, looked at me, and said, "I design modern commercial buildings for a living, and I genuinely have absolutely no idea how they achieve this."
Wow.
He was completely baffled. Baffled means entirely helplessly confused or bewildered. When a modern engineering expert is baffled by 15th century stonework, you know you are standing in the presence of historical genius.
Absolutely. So let's carry that deep respect for ancient engineering from the damp, high-altitude cloud forests of the Andes to the bone-dry, scorching sands of the Middle East. Let's travel to Petra, situated in southern Jordan.
Oh, Petra. The entrance to Petra is arguably the most dramatic arrival of any historical site on Earth.
It really sets the stage.
It does. You don't just pull up to a parking lot and walk through a turnstile. You have to navigate the Sick. The Sick is a twisting, incredibly narrow canyon that winds through the rock for over a kilometer. The sandstone walls soar hundreds of feet above you in these smooth, sweeping, organic curves. It's dark, it's cool, and when you look up, the sky is just a jagged, tiny blue ribbon.
Interestingly, the Slick wasn't carved by a river, which is what most people think. It's actually a natural geological fault line where tectonic forces physically tore the mountain apart, and then centuries of wind and winter rains smoothed the edges.
That is fascinating.
The walk through it creates immense psychological tension. Every footstep echoes, and then suddenly, the narrow gorge fractures open, and you are hit with the grand reveal.
The treasury.
Yes. Bathed in sunlight, carved directly into the sheer cliff face, is the treasury. It's an enormous, intricately detailed architectural masterpiece, glowing in vibrant shades of pink, rose, and orange sandstone.
It literally takes your breath away. But again, the real story here is the survival engineering. Because to build a thriving metropolis of roughly 20,000 people in a brutal desert over 2,000 years ago required the Nabateans to be incredibly resourceful.
Resourceful is the perfect word.
To be resourceful means to be highly clever, adaptable, and effective at solving complex problems, especially when your materials are severely limited.
The Nabateans were masters of hydrological engineering. The desert around Petra only receives a few inches of rain a year. But when it does rain, it comes down in violent, sudden flash floods that roar through the canyons.
And a flash flood in that narrow Sick would be catastrophic. It would wipe out everything.
Exactly, which is why the Nabateans engineered a massive network of dams to completely reroute the floodwaters away from the city center. But they didn't just divert the water, they captured it.
They saved it for the dry season.
They carved thousands of cisterns into the solid rock and lined them with waterproof cement to store the water for the dry months. They even built an intricate network of terracotta pipes winding through the city to deliver fresh water.
That's so advanced for 2,000 years ago.
It gets better. They understood hydraulic gradients perfectly. They calculated the exact slope needed so the water flowed smoothly. If the angle was too steep, the water pressure would build up and shatter the clay pipes. Their resourcefulness was staggering.
They literally built an empire out of dust and flash floods. And the sheer scale of the city goes far beyond that famous treasury facade. You walk for miles. There are massive temples, a massive amphitheater carved straight out of the bedrock, and if your legs can handle it, an 800-step climb up a mountain to reach a structure even larger than the treasury called the monastery.
But the atmosphere shifts entirely when the sun sets.
It really does. You can visit Petra at night. The local Bedouin people light the entire kilometer-long path through the sick and the massive plaza in front of the treasury, with thousands of paper lanterns and candles.
It sounds ethereal.
It is. The rock walls glow softly in the candlelight. You sit on the cool sand, drinking sweet Bedouin tea, listening to a local musician play a traditional flute, and you just stare up at this illuminated wonder and absolute silence. It brings us to the vocabulary word, treasure.
Used as a verb, right?
Yes, used as a verb. To treasure means to cherish, protect, and deeply value something. Sitting in the sand under the stars in Petra creates a visceral memory you will treasure for the very rest of your life.
That buildup through the canyon really is masterful. It reminds me of the analogy you've used to describe that specific walk.
Oh, the musical analogy. Yeah, I always compare walking through the sick to experiencing a brilliantly composed piece of classical music.
How so?
Well, the twisting, dark canyon is the slow, quiet, brooding buildup of the string section. You can feel the tension rising with every twist in the rock. And then, the exact moment the canyon walls break open and you see the glowing treasury, that is the final, overwhelming crescendo of the entire orchestra hitting you all at once. It is architectural music.
I love that. Now, if Petra is a symphony composed by human hands, our next two destinations are landscapes where humanity feels utterly insignificant compared to the roaring, raw power of nature and the staggering scale of deep time. Let's head over to North America to a place that defies all attempts to describe it. The Grand Canyon in Arizona.
It really does defy description. Which brings us to a very useful English idiom, to do something justice. If a photograph or a story does not do a place justice, it means the representation completely fails to capture the true beauty, scale, or essence of the real thing.
Right.
You can look at 1,000 high-definition drone-shot photos of the Grand Canyon, but none of them will do it justice.
That is because the human brain fundamentally struggles to comprehend the physical scale. I mean, the canyon is roughly 446 kilometers long, up to 29 kilometers wide, and over a mile deep.
And the geology behind it is fascinating. A lot of people assume a massive river just aggressively cut a deep trench into flat ground, but it's actually a story of the land rising up.
Yes, the Colorado Plateau uplift. Over millions of years, tectonic forces slowly pushed the massive plateau of rock upwards. Meanwhile, the Colorado River maintained its course, acting like a giant wire cheese slicer.
Cheese slicer, I like that.
As the land was pushed up, the river sliced down through it. When you stand at the rim and look down, you are looking at the law of superposition. The rock layers at the top are the youngest, and as you look deeper, you are looking further back into time.
It's like reading a book backwards.
Exactly. The layer at the very bottom, the Vishnu schist, is nearly 2 billion years old. That is nearly half the age of the Earth itself, just exposed to the open air.
It is deep time made visible. But what fascinates me most is that it doesn't look like a static museum exhibit. The canyon transforms. If you sit at the rim from sunrise to sunset, the landscape constantly shifts.
The light changes everything.
It does. The shadows pour into the deep valleys like dark water, completely changing the perceived geography. When the sun hits the iron-rich rock walls at dusk, they seem to physically glow, radiating heat in shades of crimson and amber.
It is visually stunning, but it is also a remarkably harsh, unforgiving environment. And that brings up a critical vocabulary word for travelers. Undertaking.
An undertaking.
An undertaking is a serious, physically or mentally challenging task or project. Hiking down into the Grand Canyon is a massive undertaking.
This is a warning every visitor needs to hear. Because of gravity, hiking down into the canyon is deceivingly easy. You feel energetic, you're bounding down the trail, snapping photos, but the canyon is an inverted mountain.
That's a dangerous illusion.
Yes, and it acts like a giant geological oven. The deeper you go, the more the rock walls trap the heat. Temperatures at the bottom can be 20 degrees hotter than at the rim. When you finally turn around to hike back up, you are fighting gravity, muscle exhaustion, and brutal desert heat.
Which leads to a lot of emergencies.
So many. Park rangers have to conduct hundreds of rescues every single year for tourists who thought a Camlin hike was just a casual stroll. It is a serious undertaking.
For those who want to truly immerse themselves in that scale without the brutal hike, rafting down the Colorado River at the very bottom is the ultimate experience. You are entirely disconnected from the modern world. You navigate massive whitewater rapids, and at night, you sleep on sandbanks under incredibly clear, star-filled skies, surrounded by mile-high walls of ancient rock.
It makes you feel like the last surviving human on the planet. And we have an idiom for that feeling of pure awe, to steal someone's breath. When you look up from the bottom of the canyon at those towering illuminated walls, the sheer majesty of it literally steals your breath. Your lungs just pause because your brain is so overloaded by the grandeur.
Now let's leave the silent ancient rocks of the canyon and travel to an environment defined entirely by movement, noise, and raw biological power. We are heading to East Africa, to the vast savanna ecosystems of the Serengeti in Tanzania and the Masai Mara in Kenya.
We are talking about the Great Migration. This is the largest overland migration of mammals in the world. Over 1 million wildebeest, joined by hundreds of thousands of zebras and gazelles, constantly moving across the Golden Plains in a massive, endless loop.
And their movement isn't random. They are following the rain. The entire ecosystem is driven by the rainfall patterns, which trigger the growth of fresh grass.
Right.
But it's an incredibly synchronized biological dance. For example, the zebras eat the tall, tough upper portion of the grass, which they can digest. By eating that top layer, they expose the shorter, softer, more nutritious bottom layer of the grass, which is exactly what the wildebeest need. They act as a massive, synchronized lawn mowing team.
The sheer volume of life is staggering. When the herds are on the move, the ground physically shakes from the drumming of millions of hooves. It is the definition of our next vocabulary word. Mesmerizing.
And mesmerizing.
If something is mesmerizing, it holds your attention so completely that you cannot look away. It is hypnotic, like watching a fire burn.
But part of what makes it so mesmerizing is the brutal honesty of the ecosystem. This is not a sanitized nature documentary you can just pause. When these massive herds have to cross the Mara River, it is chaos.
Oh, the river crossings.
They are facing fast-flowing currents, massive crocodiles waiting just below the surface, and prides of lions patrolling the steep banks. It is life, death, and survival playing out in real time, right in front of your Jeep. It is nature at its most raw and unfiltered.
A local safari guide told me something once that completely rewired how I view the wilderness. We had been sitting in the Jeep with the engine off for over an hour, sweating in the heat, looking at nothing but tall grass.
Just waiting.
Yeah, and I was getting restless. And he turned to me and said, "Out here, you don't go looking for the animals. You wait, and you watch, and the bush decides what it wants to show you."
That is a profoundly different way of moving through the world.
It really is. But I have to ask, we live in such a hyper-stimulated instant gratification society. If I'm bored at home, I click a button and stream a movie. I have endless entertainment in my pocket. How does a modern human, wired for constant stimulation, adapt to sitting in a hot Jeep for 4 hours, just waiting for the savannah to decide to show them something?
Well, it's incredibly jarring for the first day or two. People get anxious. But then the Serengeti actively forces a psychological slowdown. You learn very quickly that you cannot hurry a sleeping lion, and you cannot schedule a river crossing.
You just have to surrender.
Exactly. The savannah strips away your illusion of control. You are forced to accept that you are merely a guest in a deeply complex world that operates on its own ancient, unhurried timetable. It forcibly teaches you the lost art of true patience.
You leave the savannah fundamentally changed by that patience. All right, let's transition from the harsh, raw reality of the savannah and the desert to two of the world's most romanticized, postcard-perfect waterscapes. But as we'll explore, beneath their tranquil beauty, both of these locations were shaped by incredibly violent geological histories and are steeped in ancient legends. Let's travel to the Greek island of Santorini.
Santorini is iconic. Even if you have never heard the name, you have seen the image. Brilliant, blindingly whitewashed buildings topped with vibrant blue domes, tumbling down the side of a steep, dark cliff overlooking the deep blue Aegean Sea.
It's stunning.
The towns of Oyuia and Fira are the architectural centerpieces here. And to describe how these villages sit on the rock, we use the word cling. To cling means to hold on tightly to something, usually out of necessity or fear. These ancient villages literally cling to the sheer cliffside, looking as though a strong wind might send them slipping into the water at any moment.
And there is a terrifying, fascinating reason for that dramatic cliffside geography. Santorini is not just a standard island. It is the rim of a massive, dormant volcano.
Yes, the Minoan eruption, also known as the Thera eruption, which occurred roughly 3,600 years ago. It was one of the most catastrophic volcanic events in recorded human history. The volcano violently expelled an estimated 100 cubic kilometers of magma into the sky.
100 cubic kilometers.
The eruption was so massive that the underlying magma chamber completely emptied out, causing the entire center of the island to collapse in on itself, plunging into the sea.
So what remains today is a caldera, a flooded volcanic crater. So that beautifully deep blue sea you were looking at from your hotel balcony is actually filling the mouth of a sleeping volcano. It's wild to think about.
It really is.
The ash from that eruption buried local settlements, perfectly preserving the ancient town of Akrotiri, much like Pompeii. And many historians believe the sheer violence of the island collapsing into the sea is what inspired Plato's legend of the lost city of Atlantis.
It adds an intense, almost ominous layer of historical depth to the aesthetic beauty. But today, the most explosive thing that happens on the island is the famous sunset ritual.
Much safe.
Much safer. Every single evening, thousands of people gather along the narrow, winding pathways and cliffs of Oya to watch the sun melt into the horizon.
Which introduces the idiom, shoulder to shoulder. When you stand shoulder to shoulder with someone, you are packed closely together, physically, side by side, in a crowded space. You are standing shoulder to shoulder with travelers from 100 different countries, speaking dozens of languages, all united in total silence to watch a star set over the sea.
It's quite a scene.
When the white buildings turn gold and then pink and then a deep lavender, the crowd actually erupts in applause. They applaud the sun. It is a moment of pure, shared humanity.
Now, from a practical standpoint, because it is so iconic, Santorini can become overwhelmingly crowded and intensely hot, especially in the peak months of July and August.
Oh, absolutely packed.
The best advice for a traveler is to visit during the shoulder seasons mid-spring or early autumn. The weather is still stunning, but the crowds have thinned out significantly. You can find a quiet rooftop, order a glass of crisp local Assyrtiko wine, which is actually grown in the volcanic ash soil, by the way, and just let the island work its charm.
Work its charm is a lovely, relaxed idiom. It means to let a person or a place naturally have a pleasing, relaxing, and winning effect on you. You don't have to force a good time in Santorini. You don't need a strict itinerary. You just sit back and let the island work its charm.
Let's trade the blue domes of the Mediterranean for the emerald waters of Southeast Asia. We are heading to northern Vietnam to the majestic Halong Bay.
Halong Bay.
This is a seascape of over 1,600 towering limestone islands and pillars, densely topped with green jungle vegetation, rising completely vertically out of the calm emerald green water.
It is the kind of place that demands a specific descriptive word. Mystical. If something is mystical, it has a deeply mysterious, almost spiritual or magical quality to it. When you wake up early in the morning on a traditional wooden junk boat in Halong Bay, and a thick fog is curling around the base of these towering limestone pillars, obscuring where the rock meets the water, the islands look like they are literally floating in midair. It is intensely mystical.
The visual landscape is so dramatic that it actually birthed a fantastic local legend. The name Halong translates to descending dragon.
Oh, I love this story.
According to local lore, when Vietnam was newly formed, the gods sent a family of great dragons down from the heavens to defend the country from invaders. The dragons spat out jewels and jade, which turned into the limestone islands, creating a massive labyrinthine wall against the enemy ships.
And the valleys.
Well, as the mother dragon charged into the sea, her massive thrashing tail violently carved the deep valleys and crevices into the earth. When the seawater rushed in to fill those valleys, only the highest peaks of the land remained above water.
I absolutely love that story. Because normally, a story about a giant magical dragon carving mountains with its tail sounds completely far-fetched. Far-fetched is our next vocabulary word.
Yeah.
It means a story or idea is highly unlikely, unconvincing, or hard to believe.
Right.
But here is the brilliant thing about Halong Bay. When you are physically standing on the deck of a boat, looking at those jagged, impossible dragon-tooth limestone towers piercing the morning mist, the idea of a dragon creating them doesn't feel far-fetched at all.
Yeah.
It feels entirely wondrously plausible.
It is a landscape designed for mythology. But scientifically, those jagged towers are the result of karst topography. Over roughly 500 million years, incredibly slow, quiet chemical reactions took place. Rainwater, which is naturally slightly acidic, slowly dissolved the soluble calcium carbonate of the limestone. Combine that with shifting tectonic plates lifting the rock up and changing sea levels, eroding the bases, and you get these dramatic vertical pillars.
Millions of years of slow, silent dripping.
Oh.
And that brings up the most impactful part of the experience for me, the profound silence.
Yes. The acoustics of the bay are unique because the massive limestone walls block the wind and absorb sound.
The stillness is absolute. I like to compare it to the theater. You know that specific, heavy, expectant silence that falls over an entire theater audience in the exact second? The house lights go completely dark right before the curtain rises on a play.
Oh, yeah. That anticipatory hush.
Exactly. That is what the stillness of Halong Bay feels like when your boat engine finally cuts out. It is a heavy, gorgeous, expectant silence.
That deep appreciation for silence is the perfect bridge to our next locations. We're moving away from the world-famous, highly photographed tourist hubs to places that offer deep, restorative peace. These are hidden retreats that prove you do not always need to flock to the most recognized global landmark to find absolute magic. Sometimes the most transformative places are the quiet ones. Let's look at Plitvice lakes in Croatia.
Right away, we need the vocabulary word, far-flung. Far-flung means very distant or remote. And we often pair it with the idiom, the ends of the earth, which refers to the most isolated, extreme, and difficult-to-reach locations on the planet.
Like Antarctica, or deep inside the Amazon.
Right. But the beauty of Plitvice lakes is that it proves you don't need to travel to the far-flung ends of the earth battling frostbite or hacking your way through dense jungles with a machete to find a pristine paradise. Some of the world's most astonishing beauty is just quietly tucked away in a calm, temperate forest in central Croatia.
Plitvice is a national park consisting of 16 distinct interconnected lakes, and what connects them is our vocabulary word, cascading. Cascading means water flowing or falling downward in stages, like a staircase. Water cascades from the upper lakes down into the lower ones through a vast, intricate, and constantly changing network of waterfalls.
But it is the color of the water and the way those waterfalls are formed that completely stops you in your tracks. Because of a unique natural alchemy of minerals and microorganisms, the lakes are an unbelievably vibrant shade of turquoise and emerald green. The water is so clear you can see every single fallen branch and schools of silverfish resting on the bottom. But the waterfalls themselves are actually alive, aren't they?
Yes, the geology is actively growing. The lakes are separated by natural dams made of a porous rock called travertine, and this is a biological process. The water is highly rich in dissolved calcium carbonate. As the water flows over moss and algae, the plants catch the minerals. The calcium carbonate crystallizes on the plants, turning them into stone.
Wait, turning plants into stone?
Literally. So the moss grows a millimeter, the stone builds up a millimeter. Over thousands of years, these living plants have essentially 3D printed massive cascading stone dams. The waterfalls are literally growing and shifting their paths every year.
That is incredible. And you explore this living park by walking along miles of raised wooden boardwalks that wind directly over the water and weave right past the cascading falls. If you visit in autumn, when the surrounding Bent's beach and fir forest turns violently red, orange, and gold, and the water is that piercing turquoise, you feel as though you are physically walking through a high-definition digital painting or wandering through a literal fairy tale. It is deeply, intensely peaceful.
Speaking of peace and restoration, let's move to a landscape that has been actively curing weary travelers for centuries, the Swiss Alps. We are talking about the impossibly perfect scenery of Switzerland. Jagged, snow-capped giants like the Matterhorn and the Jungfrau piercing the sky, rolling bright green alpine meadows and dark wooden chalets with window boxes overflowing with bright red geraniums.
And to experience it properly, you must embrace unhurried travel. Taking a journey on something like the famous Glacier Express train, it is affectionately called the slowest express train in the world. It moves intentionally slowly through massive mountain passes, over dizzying stone viaducts, and through spiraling tunnels. You sit by massive panoramic windows, drinking hot coffee, and just let the geography slowly wash over you.
Which brings us to the perfect vocabulary word for the Alps, restore. To restore means to bring back strength, health, or a feeling of well-being to someone who is depleted. People have traveled to the Swiss Alps for hundreds of years specifically to be restored.
The historic prescription for exhaustion is simple. Crisp, freezing mountain air, rigorous physical hiking through valleys ringing with the melodic sound of heavy brass cowbells, and eating deeply hearty, high-calorie local food like rich melted raclette cheese scraped over hot potatoes.
There is actual physiology behind why this works too. The mountain air is often rich in negative ions, which are believed to increase the flow of oxygen to the brain, resulting in higher alertness and decreased drowsiness. Combine that with the cardiovascular output of hiking, which burns off the stress hormone cortisol and releases endorphins. It creates an interesting physical paradox.
It really does. And I want to pose this question directly to you, the listener. Think about why this is true. Why is it that feeling total physical exhaustion, the kind where your calf muscles ache from climbing a steep alpine trail all day and your lungs are burning from the altitude, why does that feel so infinitely better and more restorative than the mental and emotional exhaustion you feel after sitting perfectly still at a desk job for 8 hours?
It's so true, isn't it?
It is. Physical exhaustion in nature heals you, while mental exhaustion indoors drains you. The Alps are the ultimate cure for the modern sedentary world.
That is a profound contrast. Now, as much as we love wandering through the philosophical clouds and the alpine meadows, we need to bring this deep dive back down to solid ground. How do we actually turn these beautiful dreams into concrete reality? Let's talk about the practicalities of making someday happen today.
Let's talk about budget first, because money is the #1 reason people keep their journals empty and put off their dreams. The biggest myth perpetuated by the travel industry is that experiencing these wonders requires extreme luxury. It absolutely doesn't.
Oh, not at all.
You do not need to stay in a 5-star resort in Santorini to see the sun go down. The sunset looks exactly the same whether you are sipping a $200 bottle of champagne on a private infinity pool balcony or drinking a $3 bottle of local wine sitting on a dusty public wall with your legs dangling over the edge. The wonder of the world is entirely free.
The majesty of the Grand Canyon doesn't care about your hotel room. The key to making it happen is to start small, but start definitively. Pick just one place from the 10 we discussed today, just one, and attach a specific date to it in your calendar.
Make it real.
Exactly. It is a proven psychological phenomenon that the moment you lock in a date, the abstract dream becomes a concrete goal. You start saving your money a little differently, your brain starts researching, and the momentum builds.
And regarding time, we have to talk about our next vocabulary word, postpone. To postpone means to delay something until a later time. So many of us plan to postpone our big adventures until we reach retirement, assuming we will finally have the ultimate freedom of time and money. But there is a massive flaw in that logic, especially when it comes to the physical demands of exploring the world.
This is where we bring in the word seasoned. A seasoned traveler is someone who is highly experienced, knowledgeable, and hardened by many journeys. Even the most seasoned travelers will tell you that the physical reality of the human body changes no matter how fit you try to stay.
It's just biology.
Right. Hiking the brutal 4-day Inca trail up to Machu Picchu, or climbing the 800 uneven, crumbling stone steps up to the monastery in Petra is vastly more achievable when you are in your 30s or 40s than when you are in your 70s. Do not wait until your body limits your curiosity.
That is such crucial advice. Go while your knees can handle the descent into the canyon. And finally, we need to talk about what you do when you actually arrive at these locations. We are talking about a digital detox, which brings us to the idiom, to tick off a list.
To tick off a list.
If you are just ticking off a list, you are hurriedly completing items one by one just to say you did them, collecting stamps and a passport without actually absorbing the experience.
Modern tourism has become deeply obsessed with documentation. People travel halfway across the world just to look at the Grand Canyon through the 6-inch screen of their smartphone, desperate to capture content to prove to other people they were there rather than actually being there for themselves.
There's actually a fascinating psychological concept for this called the photo-taking impairment effect. Studies show that when you take a photo of something, your brain essentially offloads the memory to your phone's hard drive. It says, the phone has remembered this, so I don't need to. As a result, you actually recall fewer details about the objects you photograph compared to the things you just observe with your own eyes.
By trying to capture the memory digitally, you are actively erasing it biologically, which introduces our final and perhaps most important vocabulary word, present. To be present means to be fully, mentally, and emotionally focused on the exact moment you are in, completely engaged with your current physical surroundings, rather than worrying about the past or the future.
If you spend thousands of dollars to stand under the northern lights, take your one photograph and then put the phone deep in your pocket. Look up. Breathe the freezing air. Feel the snow crunch under your boots. Be completely present.
So bringing it all together, we want to ask you a few questions to reflect on. Out of all the breathtaking places we explored today, from the freezing Arctic to the golden savanna, which one single place would you choose to visit first? Do you agree that true life-changing travel does not require luxury? And how do you personally balance the desire to take photos with the need to remain truly present in a beautiful moment?
Those are questions every traveler must answer for themselves. We have covered an immense amount of ground in this deep dive. We have traveled from the glowing, magnetic skies of the Arctic to the rose-red sandstone water systems of Petra. We have drifted through the mystical, dissolving limestone islands of Halong Bay and stood on the vast, drumming plains of the Serengeti.
The ultimate summary is this. Life is incredibly short, and the world is patiently waiting for you. But, as we discussed with the coral atolls of the Maldives, the world is also changing rapidly. Glaciers are melting in the Alps, oceans are rising, and delicate ecosystems are under immense pressure.
It is a stark reality. Some of these wonders will look fundamentally different in a single generation's time, but that fact should not be a source of paralyzing despair. Instead, it should be the ultimate catalyst. It is the reason to pack your bags and go right now while these places exist in their current breathtaking glory.
I want to leave you with one final, provocative thought to mull over, something we haven't touched on yet regarding the psychology of travel. We always talk about how awe-inspiring it is to stand on the edge of the Grand Canyon or look up at the Aurora Borealis. But what if the true superpower of visiting these extraordinary places isn't just the trip itself?
What if the real magic is how the memory of that profound awe permanently rewires your brain? We know that experiencing awe increases neuroplasticity and decreases self-centered thinking. What if staring into the vastness of the Serengeti actually makes you more capable of noticing the quiet, beautiful details in your own neighborhood when you return home? Does leaving your comfort zone and traveling to the far-flung ends of the earth actually teach you how to be more deeply, quietly present in your ordinary, everyday life?
That is a beautiful question to carry with you. The journey doesn't end when you unpack your suitcase. The journey is who you become because you went.
The world is out there, waiting for you to stop promising and start packing. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey today. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.